Mom, Dad, there's no way that I can express to you what I'm feeling right now. My heart is full to bursting, except to say, I'm the king of the world!
Hello and welcome back to Cameron, King of the World. We're finally at Avatar, and if you've been following these videos in sequence, it took a while to get to this one because the behind-the-scenes story of Avatar was a very long video, so I apologize for that, but we're finally here now and I feel like a weight has lifted and I can just talk about the film without worrying about too many of the details and kind of give you my story of loving this film over the years when I first saw it and how I feel about it now. So I honestly can't remember much buzz about this even when the trailers were coming out. Like, I was aware that Cameron was working on a film called Avatar, and I really don't remember how I felt about it. I must have been aware of it in some way, shape or form, but I don't really recall any anticipation or excitement about it. It was there, you know. It was just there's that film that's coming out by James Cameron, looks a bit weird. People were making fun of it because of the blue cat people and stuff. It looks a bit like Fern Gully, and there wasn't a whole lot of like buzz for me internally. And around that time, I really couldn't care less about movies coming out because I was speaking to this girl from Norway at the time, and it just completely dominated my life. It was just like I fell so completely and wildly into a crush on this girl, and then we met up in November of 2009, a month before Avatar came out. And then we got together very quickly, and it was just all moving so fast. And then all I really cared about was her, and it was just like, I think I'm fucking in love. Like, what's going on? This is so crazy with someone from Norway. How is it ever going to work? Oh my god! And then December hits, and we're already planning the next trip. And so Connie was set to come over to Wales in January of 2010. And it stands to reason that perhaps I would have. I mean, we talked about movies a lot, and we watched movies together, her in Norway, me in Wales, like 1, 2, 3, we hit play, we'd watch stuff together, we talked about movies, and that was a big part of my life. So I think that we probably talked about the fact that this film was coming out and that we were looking forward to seeing it, and maybe that's why I didn't see it when it came out, because I was going to wait until January for her to come over, we go see it together. I don't know if that's really true, I'm just guessing, because I can't really remember, but we did go see it, and I found the IMAX ticket somewhere recently, so and I thought that we'd seen it in December, but I now remember that she came over in January and we went to see it, and there was a lot of buzz around the film around that time, so it was like I was starting to look forward to it because of the attention the film was getting. It was in 3D, and the only thing I honestly remember about the film, the experience of seeing it for the first time, we went to the Odeon in Cardiff to see the 3D version, and I'm pretty sure it was in the IMAX screen as well. And I remember quite vividly the shot near the beginning when it's inside the ship that's heading to Pandora, and we're inside this big kind of funnel room with all the kind of pods that people are kind of in hypersleep. And it's the guy, he's like kind of swimming around in zero gravity, telling people like, you will be hungry, you will be weak, and getting the people to wake up and opening up the pods and stuff, and they're all floating around, and just the depth of seeing all these different pods, it was like, whoa, this is really cool. It's a little bit blurry because you have that ghosting effect with 3D unless you're sitting perfectly in the right position in the screening room. And I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. But it kind of just, for me, 3D always made things look a little bit dark. And again, that ghosting effect, it just isn't quite crisp. And so I never really enjoyed 3D. And the only time I remember having a bit of awe about it was when the little kind of the white fluffy things, I forget what they're called. There's a kind of a real world equivalent where that thing you pick up and you blow it and they all flow. I don't know if you know what that thing is. My brain just seems to not be working recently. There's just all these simple things I should know the names of. But the thing. I mean, it's on the fucking cover of the Blu-ray. Those things right there. The scene when they all start floating down and they're kind of swimming around the screen and the bioluminescence and everything, and it's like a really beautiful moment. And they seem to be floating around you. That was really cool. Apart from that, the 3D did very little for me, and again, it just made things look a little bit darker than they should. And I've read interviews where Cameron has said around that time that he finds it frustrating because he believes every film should be shot in 3D forever. He loves 3D. He loves the process of it, but he says that most people in the cinema are not seeing that perfectly calibrated image that I am on the screen I have on the set, and people are seeing it darker than it should be, and that's not the way that it should be viewed. And they talk about how they wanted to kind of have every cinema in the world set up to the best possible specifications, but that's unrealistic to kind of actually make that kind of thing work worldwide, I think. So a lot of people didn't see it in the way that perhaps he intended, but I love the story, and I love the escapism of it, and I remember eagerly and illegally downloading the film when it first came out, on DVD and Blu-ray. And so I kind of downloaded the file, and I just would have it on when I was going to sleep. And it was just, I loved the film and the world and the characters. And, it became this huge juggernaut of a movie that just made so much money. And then just very quickly, it just fell off the face of the fucking planet. And no one ever talked about it again, unless to bring up how bad it was, or how much they didn't like it, or how much it was like this movie, how much it was like that movie. And I've talked about that in previous videos and all sorts of stuff. And if you want a more focused review on the film, I'm guessing, me and Connie made a video maybe 3 or 4 years ago. I'll link that in the description of this video, and it's kind of, there's some images included in that video to give you some kind of idea, and I think I talk more about the plot and stuff like that, which I'll talk about a little bit here. I won't, kind of skim on that, but, I've always loved the film, and sometimes I second guess myself thinking, do I really love it, or is it as bad as people say it is? And so every few years I'll revisit it and go, man, this is fucking great. This is a really fucking great film. So we rewatched it a few months ago now at this point, because this Cameron series has taken so long. But a few months ago we rewatched it, and I was just like, man, I've never enjoyed it as much as I have now. As I get older, it just gets better, and I worry that the visual effects won't hold up, but they do. And there's a few shots where you can see that the same amount of kind of texture and detail hasn't gone into it, but for the most part, it's such a cohesive film in terms of the visual effects and holds up so well over 10 years later. And I'm glad that Cameron waited for the technology to really be there, because, if he'd made it in the 90s like he planned, it would have dated terribly by now, because there's so much CGI involved, and that sort of thing just wasn't done. The technology wasn't there, the equipment wasn't there, the hardware power was not there. They were stretching the hardware to its very limits, as I mentioned in the previous video, just to make this film. And it took them 2 years before they first saw the real shots from Avatar. They didn't know if it was even going to work. And I think in an interview I read with Cameron, he was talking about how, in terms of grueling schedules and grueling productions and things, The Abyss was the hardest because of all the underwater sequences, but the Avatar was perhaps the most exhausting, and the film that he was the most nervous on, because it was the longest film he made. It was like almost 4 years working on it, but it took years before they started to see the first shots of the film, and they had no idea if it was really going to work the way that they wanted it to. But it did, and it kind of turned out, I think, pretty much exactly the way that he wanted it to. In terms of the various cuts, let's just talk about that. Before we get to the plot, there are 3 versions of the film. There's the theatrical cut, which I think is, I'm not even sure how long it is. I'd say it's probably around 2.5 hours, 2 hours 35, something like that. It might say on the back of the Blu-ray, actually, and I can just give you a more detailed... Yeah, there we go. So the original theatrical version is 2 hours and 35 minutes. Then there's the special edition version of the film, which was re-released in cinemas in, I think, August of 2010, about half a year after its initial theatrical release. And that was 163 minutes, so almost 2 hours and 45. And then there's the collector's edition extended cut, which came out on this Blu-ray, which is 170 minutes, so 2 hours and 50 minutes altogether. And obviously you have the credits and stuff, so I'd say that at its longest, the film is probably 2 hours and 40 minutes without the credits. And I only watch now the extended collector's edition cut, which includes, I think that the special edition version, re-released in cinemas, had 9 minutes of additional footage of like Pandora and CGI material that they spent quite a few $1 million on kind of, kind of re-rendering, rendering for the first time and kind of putting them back into the movie, and kind of putting those extra scenes in. And then for the special collector's edition version cut, whatever you want to call it, that also includes some live action deleted scenes. And the only ones that I know of really are the beginning of the film, the kind of prologue set on Earth, where you see Jake kind of in a bar getting into a fight just because he wants to and getting thrown out into the alley. And I love that. I love those scenes because it's a very Blade Runner-y kind of vision of the future on Earth. and it's the only time you really see Earth in the movie is in this kind of deleted alternate opening for the film, which wasn't in the theatrical version. I just think it's not very long, it doesn't drag for me, and it's just a nice kind of a micro background to his character before he gets there. Does the film work without it? Yes, but I'll take more of it, if I can get it, and I really like that opening sequence, and so it's the version I think I'm always going to watch. And I'm pretty sure that one of the scenes that was put back in for the collector's edition extended cut was a scene of Grace Augustine kind of reflecting and talking about what happened with the school that she was teaching the Na'vi in, and kind of the conflict that happened. I don't think that's in the theatrical cut of the film. I might be wrong about that, but either way, that scene to me is integral to her character and her story. And so that's really the only two things I can think of. And as far as the stuff that was included for the special edition release in the cinemas with like the new Pandora scenes, the CGI scenes, I have no clue. I probably should have researched it for the sake of this video, but I didn't. But it's one of those films that I didn't like grow up on it and watched one version for so long, and then the special edition came out or anything like that. So I haven't seen it enough times to really feel the difference. I just know that the main change for me is the beginning, is that Earth sequence, which is a very good sequence, and so I'm glad that it's in the movie. And I love the world so much that I think I'd watch a 4-hour version of the film. It's an epic story, and I like a lot of length to an epic story. And so this film being nearly 3 hours long, it just breezes by. It really does, because I love the story and the world and the characters and the visuals and the music and everything. So it's fine. Now, one thing I will say about Avatar, because I am quite a big defender of it, and I do love the film. The one thing that I always thought was just awful was the name of the material or mineral or whatever you want to call it, the rock that they mine on the planet of Pandora, or the moon of Pandora. I guess it's a moon technically, but the one thing that always bothered me was the name of that substance and material, which is unobtainium. And I just remember thinking, really? Unobtainium? Because it's hard to get? Are you kidding me? How lazy is that when it comes to the writing? You have a film where there's the whole like bio fucking diversity of that entire planet has been created from the ground up. The plants, there's like a 600-page document on the Blu-ray about all of the lore and the planet and the science and biology of everything. And you call the one thing that's like vital to the story that gets mentioned a lot throughout the film unobtainium? Weird choice. And I looked into it in recent years, and apparently it's something that's used in science fiction. It's like a kind of catch-all term, and so it's not like Cameron came up with it. And then in one sense, it's almost like it almost works in the sense of like these big businessmen, they just call it unobtainium because they're not really interested in giving it a scientific name. They just want to say, it's just like just slap a name onto it because that's what we want, and it doesn't matter what it is. So in that sense, it kind of works. And I suppose if it's been pre-established as something, then it's kind of Cameron referencing science fiction past, and that's something that he's very passionate about. He grew up on science fiction novels and devoured all of that stuff, science fiction literature when he was a kid. So I think for him, it's lesser lazy, or we'll just call it that, and it has more of a meaning to him. Maybe he read it in some of the books that he read growing up. I don't know. So that's one of the things I've actually softened on over time, even though it's such a micro detail that it really doesn't matter at all. Anyway, so the film itself, Avatar, bloody hell, 10 minutes later, we have Jake Sully, whose brother was a kind of scientist and was on this Avatar program to go to the moon of Pandora, away from Earth, to basically enter the body of the Na'vi species who live on Pandora, this humanoid alien species. And so they've created this way to grow like lifeless Na'vi body. This is one thing that I find weird about the film actually, is like when they grow those bodies, which come from like, I guess, splicing DNA of Na'vi and human DNA and part of the DNA of the person who's going to inhabit that body through a psychic link, is that just a dead lifeless body? Like is there a soul in there? Is there a brain in there? Because surely if you're growing something, it would grow a brain and a consciousness and a heart and right? Like, that's the one thing I get kind of caught up on, is like, well, is that really just, like, I don't know, it just feels like, it feels like you're killing someone by going into that thing, but then I guess it's just there floating in a tube, but it seems like it's breathing, and when they first see it, and the guy says to Jake, like, it looks just like you, it seems like it's alive, so is the heart beating, but the brain's not there? Is it an empty brain? I don't know. I'm sure Cameron has all the answers and he has the permissible reasonings for these things, but it's something that I've always thought about, I guess. But Jake, you know, was in the military. They call him a jarhead at some point, or part of the Jarhead clan. I think he says that actually, or maybe he says that when he meets the Na'vi, or maybe Grace calls him that. But you know, he's just this typical Marine, and you know, I told myself I could pass any test a man could pass, and he's just this, you know, no offense, he's just this kind of vanilla, you know, military dude. And he got into an accident. I can't remember what actually happened to him, but he can't use his legs. He's paralyzed. And in the kind of alternate opening sequence on Earth, you see him kind of with his like emaciated legs that he hasn't been using for a long time, kind of shifting them up onto his bed, which is a really nice piece of visual effects work. But just shows you that he's been in that situation for a long time, and he's really down and out on his luck, which is kind of how the actor was, Sam Worthington, at the time that he auditioned for the movie, which kind of fits well with the character. And I've talked about in the previous videos, I won't retread the same stuff, but I do feel like Sam Worthington gives a fairly bland performance that really works for the character, which sounds like the most backhanded compliment you can possibly imagine, but I think that he has that real everyman quality about him. He doesn't have a great on-screen charisma, but I really like him in the role because he just feels like anyone. He feels like anyone could be that character, and there's a real sense of escapism to that, where you can really connect into his story and his journey, which is a great journey and story. So, you know, Jake, his brother, has the same DNA, so he gets drafted into this Avatar program, something he hasn't trained for, and so Grace Augustine, played by Sigourney Weaver, she kind of runs the program, and she's very reticent to him to be involved and stuff, because she just sees him as a military grunt, not as someone who trained for years for this mission. And for him, it's just like, whatever, you know, it's better than just getting thrown out in the alley in bars and pubs and clubs and getting into fights and stuff just for the fuck of it. So, you know, he'll take the money, and there is a promise that he'll get his legs back, because it is possible in this future, you know, scenario of the world to get your spine fixed and to reverse paralysis, but it would cost a lot of money, and so this is a way for him to get his legs back. And as soon as he arrives on Pandora at the humans complex, he meets Quaritch, this sergeant played by Stephen Lang, who's just like, you know, he gives a great performance, Stephen Lang, but it's a very like cartoony kind of military guy, you know, and I like that it fits for the story for me, you know, and there are elements of this film, and again, it feels like a defense when I talk about it with I talked about it with Alita, which we'll talk about in a few videos time, about how some of it is cheesy, but I like that. It just feels like I'm trying to defend it with a very weak argument, but I do think that this kind of story just feels like a classic kind of, almost like a fable-like story, a fairy tale-like story. You know, it's this kind of wild escapism, and you do have these fairly, you know, one-dimensional characters. I would say that Quaritch is a fairly one-dimensional character with not much depth to him, but Stephen Lang basically plays that one note as you know, as good as anyone can play it, I think, and he makes her a really good kind of just shithead heel, basically, like a great villain for the film. And again, I would say that perhaps Jake Sully is a bit one-dimensional in the way that a lot of the audience watching the film are probably one-dimensional people. I don't know. Like I say, it's the average everyday man quality. And I think that there are people out there, a lot of people out there like me, you know, who just feel like, you know, I'm just a guy. There's nothing special about me at all, you know. And while that may not be true, and there's complexity and layers to all of us, and we all have so much to give and offer, I think that a lot of us feel that way. And so when I see a character like Jake Sully, I can instantly connect to that, as, you know, that's kind of like how I would be in that situation. And it works for me in that sense. Whereas there are other characters like Grace Augustine who have a lot more depth to her. And I think Cameron is just better at writing women, perhaps. And there are people who disagree with that and think that he's terrible at writing women. But I think that he's better at the female side of things. And then you have Neytiri, played by Zoe Saldana, kind of the main Na'vi character of the film. And she's a great character, and there's so much more depth to her that could be explored, I think, in future movies, and we'll see how that pans out with the Avatar sequels. But the characters get set up very well, I think, and I like how Jake kind of comes into the Na'vi body, and the beauty of it is that he's paralyzed. And again, it's a very simple kind of story mechanic, but here's a guy who can't walk, and now he's in this alien body, and he's not really interested in in like scientific exploration and discovery and studying of the Na'vi or anything like that. He just loves the fact that he can walk again, you know, and he just jumps out of the bed and he just bursts out of the facility and just starts running because he can run, you know, and it's just like, fuck it. And it's such a liberating, you know, great scene to watch when he gets to run again for the first time in years. and the jealousy that comes out of the fact that he's really taking to the Na'vi link, even though he hasn't trained for it from like the other guy in the program. And as I said, Quaritch kind of gets in Jake's ear very quickly and is like, okay, you're a military guy. You're going to go into this Na'vi program, which I don't give a shit about, but I want you to study them. Well, not to study them, but to kind of get a beat on them. Tell me what's going on. Like feed back your information to me, because I don't want Grace Augustine fucking up the military side of this, which is an interesting kind of the devil and angel of the Pandora human facility, which is you have the scientific community which are just trying to study peacefully the Na'vi and get to learn more about them and everything. And then you have the military who just want to mine all of that unobtainium because it's very lucrative, it makes a lot of money. And of course, the big deposit of unobtainium is underneath the home tree, the base of where most of the Na'vi live in that part of the moon. Basically, I think it's the Omaticaya, so that the clan that we focus on in the movie, their kind of home base is this huge tree. I love how they've even thought about how gigantism in plants and trees sometimes occurs, and how in a moon like Pandora it could possibly actually grow like that, which is interesting. I like it when there's at least some kind of scientific foundation in theory and logic that could perhaps work, even though it is a complete fabrication and pretty much a fantasy movie. But regardless, so the story set up very well in terms of what the military want, what the scientists want, and how those two parties begin to clash more and more as the film goes on, and how Jake gets lost in the woods and kind of unwittingly becomes ingratiated into part of the clan and meets Neytiri, and she trains him to kind of be one of them basically, and then you have a little bit of the Dances with Wolves kind of influence and stuff. But I just love the discovery of it, and the Jake is just a perfect conduit for what the audience is experiencing and seeing more of the world. And they talk about how they wanted to hold back on the bioluminescence of the forest and to gradually reveal it. So when you first visit the forest, it's daytime. The next time it's at night, and Jake's stuck there, but he's like around a campfire, so you don't see anything. And then at the right moment, they kind of almost turn on the switch, and you see all the blue bioluminescence in this beautiful forest. And there's such a wonder to it. And the spirituality of the film is something that I really connect to, and I just enjoy that kind of storytelling, and something that has deep meaning for people that goes beyond the physical. I think is a way that I would almost like to live my life, even though I don't really believe in that stuff. So it's kind of like a wish fulfillment, or like a romanticism of how I wish the world worked, perhaps, and that that kind of spirituality was something that I actually got stuff out of in my real life. So there's a escapism to that as well, I think, and the romance that kind of comes out between Jake and Neytiri. And Zoe Saldana, I've said before, just gives an incredible performance in the film. And it's difficult when it's motion capture, but again, once you've seen the behind the scenes stuff and you see the side by side, videos of her performance in the film and her performance on that grey stage, and you see every ounce of that pain and that hurt and that suffering that the character goes through when she realizes Jake's been lying to her, and it's all there on the screen. Her performance comes through. And it's interesting, when Cameron was making this and he was bringing over filmmakers like Steven Spielberg and Peter Jackson to see some of the stuff that he was doing, and I believe that then led on to the group of them kind of producing and Spielberg directing the Tintin movie, which is a great movie, by the way. But they're looking at films from a different perspective now and how motion capture works. And I think Spielberg said that it's like it's not CGI anymore, it's like digital makeup, and other people have said it's just like digital makeup, and I think even Andy Serkis said this, and Andy Serkis is like a guy who's been working with this stuff for decades now, and is arguably the kind of the godfather of motion capture performances, but and technology, even the way that it's used. But a lot of artists and animators are really offended by that, because they're putting in all this hard work in on the computer, matching the performance of the actor to the finished animated product. And it's not just a case of taking a texture of a character and slapping it over a face that's been recorded in live action and then all just works the same way. They have to go in and finesse these details like that. There's a whole art to that as well. So it isn't just the performance and then like a pre-built digital model. There's so much care and effort and artistry in the animation that goes into it's so complex. It's so complex. Like, you can't even fathom. Like, for me, it would just be overwhelming to even work on a shot like that, because there's so many ways that you could do it. And to get it picture perfect, to get it right, to get it to feel like you're not in the uncanny valley and you're actually just watching a quasi-human emotion coming from one of these Na'vi faces. And I think that they really achieved that. I think I mentioned in the previous video how there's only like really 6 main Na'vi characters in the film. So you have Jake, Neytiri, her parents, Sute, and Grace's kind of avatar. And they're really the only 6 that you see in any kind of... And so if you look in the background, you will see that some of those Na'vi characters aren't quite as well defined or have the insane textures or detailing. And that's just because of when the film was made, it still was really pushing the boundaries of technology. And so I look forward to seeing the sequels where hopefully the background characters will look even more impressive and that kind of thing. But you know, you're only really focused on those characters anyway, and it all fit. I don't really think about that when I'm watching the film. It's only when I was reading some of the interviews and going, oh yeah, when I think about it, some of the background characters don't look as well refined, you know. But again, kind of limitations of the technology, but also kind of just let's just focus everything on the people we're seeing on screen, the characters that we're engaging with. Some of the action sequences in this film, of which there aren't that many, you know, it is more of an adventure film than an action film. But once we get to that finale, it's incredible. I mean, there's so many great scenes in the film that I love, and I love the section when the science team kind of go rogue and they take the pod up into the mountains and stuff, and we have Grace and Jake and the team there kind of working off the grid. I just like that kind of group that forms and stuff, and I like the chemistry between Grace and Jake. I think Sigourney Weaver's fantastic in the film. She's got a great attitude to her. Well, not in terms of the fact that she has a good attitude. She has like a real feisty attitude, and I like that about her. And it's great to watch and unfold on screen when she's kind of bullying Jake around just a little bit and stuff, and seeing his progression and him slowly beginning to fall in love with the Na'vi, with Pandora, and ultimately with Neytiri. The scene when he joins with his Banshee, you know, that line when he's like looking out and it's like, this is extremely dangerous, you might die. And he sees all these dangerous banshees and stuff that he's got to kind of run in and grab and try and bond with very quickly. It's a very difficult thing to do and pull off. And he just kind of tilts his head and says, outstanding. Like, that's a thing that me and Connie have quoted pretty much since that film came out, is outstanding. We watched the film, I think it was Alita, and someone just goes, outstanding, and I was like, you know, it's like a line that's now a word even that's, for me, forever associated with that character and with that movie. And when he finally gets it on and then he starts flying and it levels out and he begins to fly through those Hallelujah Mountains, which in and of themselves are a breathtaking location in the film. And then when he starts flying with Neytiri, and they've said that the shot where Neytiri looks over at Jake when they're flying and she smiles at him, that was like the moment when it really became obvious that this was going to work so well, because that character just came to life when it was the first time she smiles in the movie, and it gives her character a different edge, a different side to her personality. It shows you the warmth that exists there, because when we first see her, she's very cold, very stern, you know, and the way that she's very, you know, she doesn't like Jake a lot. And so it's a great kind of relationship that they're rubbing each other the wrong way, and then they begin to fall for each other, and it just very naturally evolves. And then, you know, things get like wedge gets driven between them towards the end, but it's a great relationship, and that the flying scenes are just gorgeous, it's visually stunning, and then the actual final battle scene is just, it's immense. It really is. And you have this it reminds me of Return of the Jedi, and there is a certain kind of emotion even to Return of the Jedi when you have these little teddy bears taking down, bringing down this technological empire to its knees, with all of these, you know, rudimentary methods. And that's essentially what you get with the fight in Avatar. I mean, a lot of the Na'vi die, but they're taking out all these big gunships and stuff, because I mean, I just love that kind of, you know, I want to say man versus nature aspect, but you know, the idea of the military going against just like and you know, you can draw comparisons to that with a lot of things that have happened in recent history and stuff, but there's just something satisfying about seeing the arrogance of man, the hubris of man, represented in these big kind of, you know, elaborate and extravagant gun warships. They're just these disgusting weapons of, you know, huge destruction, and then you have just these kind of natives with these like bow and arrows and all these, just hardly anything really, but they bring such a fight to them that they bring them down, you know, and then a lot of lives get lost and stuff. But it's and then you have the animals joining in. It's like, fuck yeah, like it's just awesome. I love the final battle. It's just really involving, and every time I see it, I go, oh wow, I forgot how great this was. Just in terms of the choreography, you know, the cinematography, the way everything is so clearly laid out, and the battle is so clearly put. I just think it's a incredibly underrated sequence. I think it's just a fantastic final battle for a movie, and then the quieter moments work with Jake in the forest and him and Neytiri. And yeah, there is the sex scene, but this is very beautiful, I think, and it's weird. But, you know, it kind of works for what the characters have been set up to be, I think, and the kind of tale that they have that has the kind of fibers, and how it's almost like a much more intimate thing than actual human sex, you know. And obviously, I don't know whether they actually do more than that, but that idea of a psychic link, you know, it's and maybe people find that a bit too outlandish, a bit too silly, that when they have sex, it's more of a kind of mental thing, you know, and maybe that's a bit too weird for some people. Makes me think of that scene in Judge Dredd when Sandra Bullock's like, let's have sex, and puts the headset on. But yeah, so maybe not as exciting perhaps, but you know, they blend that with the physical in Avatar in that scene where they kind of become intimate together. And but you know, the quiet moments really register, and again, the spirituality of it, and the whole lore of Awa I find really fascinating and interesting. And the finale of the film, the third act, is just great when it all starts to come together. And then you have the humans who kind of, a few of them who decide, you know, I'm gonna stand on the right side of history here in this situation. I'm gonna kind of do the right thing, and so I just can't wait to see where it goes next. I really can't. I love the film. There's not really much more to say. I'm not going to defend it. I'm not going to try and, you know, convince anyone of how great it is. I just love it. It has lots of elements of other films and other stories, and that's just fine to me, because it creates its own story and lore out of that, and does something that I've still never seen before. And it's you know, Roger Ebert, like I said in a previous video, said that for him, seeing Avatar felt a little bit like seeing Star Wars for the first time in 1977. And I felt a little bit like that. And that's interesting, because there have been two films that I felt like that about. And they're really weird films. There's been two films that I've seen in the cinema where I felt like this is like a new Star Wars. And it's not Avatar. The first one was Serenity in 2005, I believe, which was a spin-off of Firefly, which I hadn't seen at the time. And I thought, like, this is like the new Star Wars, and it, you know, that kind of died to death, as well as the TV series. I haven't gone back to that world for a very long time. And the other one was Thor: The Dark World, which I love that film. People shit on it. I really like the second Thor movie, but it was the stuff on Asgard that just felt like a new Star Wars. Like, it's so fucking good. And, you know, the third one, Ragnarok, was its own kind of entirely, you know, Kiwi thing with Taika Waititi at the helm. But those are the only two films that I felt like this is like a new Star Wars to me. Where Avatar, it isn't like a new Star Wars, it's the first Avatar. I don't know. And it does get all that shit for being similar to previous films, and I hate that I keep talking about it, but I just think it's a really weak argument, you know, against it. I really do. The score is beautiful. It's just such a shame that James Horner died as young as he did, with the plane crash and everything, but you know, what a legacy he left behind, and the music in this film is stunning. It's just really rousing, and a blend of a lot of different styles. And as I said before, he created kind of two scores, one more traditional orchestration, one using more traditional instruments and things that are made out of, you know, wood and things like that, and not necessarily kind of brass instruments and more traditional instrumentation. But so he created two different scores with two very different styles for kind of the human side of it, the Na'vi side of it, and then blends them together, and you just get a really cool sounding, you know, fitting, sweeping score for it has a sweeping feel with the orchestration, but it has that earthy feel of the other things, and you feel like a real world and culture exists within that rainforest on Pandora, and I think it's the Omaticaya clan. So yeah, that's pretty much it for Avatar. You know, I love the film. I keep saying it. What more can I really say? But again, watching it now, it just it was the most of it I've ever enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to watching it again, you know, before the second one comes out. And it's with great anticipation I look forward to the sequels, because for me, Cameron has made two sequels in his life, and they've both been fucking fantastic, you know. And you can argue whether, you know, Alien or Aliens is which one's the best. You can argue over Terminator and Terminator 2. And what I like is that, for me, both instances are sequels that are in some ways better than the first one, are great films in their own right, but also don't reflect negatively on the first one. You know, I think that Alien and Aliens are two masterpieces in very different ways. Similar with the Terminator and Terminator 2, they're different films, even though they share a same thematic thread, and they have a new theme introduced. But I think that Cameron really builds off the first one, but does something different and expands it in a way that's really natural. So, you know, I love Avatar. If a sequel would never get made, I'd be fine with that because I love the movie. It doesn't feel incomplete to me. It doesn't feel like it's building to a sequel, even though there's clearly so much more that could be told. And clearly that's the case because there are 4 sequels in development, with the second one hopefully coming out next year in December of 2022 after, I think, 8 or 9 theatrical delays. And we'll talk about the sequels and the history of the sequels in an upcoming video. But, you know, just to kind of round off this video, I am very excited for the future of the Avatar franchise and series because I know that Cameron isn't doing it to make money. I know that he's doing it because he has a story to tell. And I think by the end of it, I don't know if everyone's going to look back on it like this, but I'm going to look back on it, I hope, and I think that Avatar will be Cameron's kind of magnum opus, his real crowning achievement as a filmmaker. And I'm sure people would be spitting their drinks out at the screen just hearing a statement like that, but I think that it's something that he's really passionate about. And I trust in Cameron. He hasn't made a bad film, in my opinion, and I don't count Piranha 2 as one of his movies, so, you know, he hasn't made a bad film yet, and he has a real knack for making a great sequel. The only thing I'm concerned about is the fact that he isn't writing the sequels. I'm sure that he has written the story or come up with the story, but he has 4 or 5, I think 5 screenwriters came up with 2, 3, 4, and 5, and it took 4 years of writing, and I'm sure he was heavily involved in that process, but it almost makes me kind of pause for a minute going, he's not writing them this time, that's interesting. But I think Avatar represents a lot of the things that he had been saying in previous movies and taps into that kind of, the sensibility he has to really lean into love stories. I think that's the main theme again for Cameron is love in Avatar. And I think perhaps that, I don't know, that I shouldn't really talk about it because I don't think it's really relevant to the movie or anything, but I'm trying to, because it's such a unique situation in which it was such a popular movie and then no one seems to fucking like it. But I wonder if, like, the cool factor of, like, the Terminator and Aliens and stuff and True Lies just blow them up and just guns and rah-rah. And then Avatar is very much a kind of an anti-violence movie. It has these action sequences in it, and I'm sure there's going to be action sequences in the next movies, but it's very much a commentary on how shit war is. And, you know, and it's, again, I've talked about that in the previous video, I suppose, but I wonder if the fact that it isn't all kind of, let's go shoot them up or whatever, and that the emphasis is on how bad that thing is. I don't know, and that, but that's then reflecting really negatively on the people who might think that, because that would mean that they're terrible people who just like blowing people up. I don't know, but there's definitely, I think, an audience out there who really love guns and really love things being blown up for the sake of it, and so perhaps coming from movies where there's a bit more wild abandon in that kind of bloodshed and bullets flying in Cameron's early movies, I don't think they're getting what they want from films like Titanic and Avatar, which is a thing, I guess. And I'm kind of losing my I'm losing the thread a little bit here, so I'll leave that in because I think there's a germ of a point in there somewhere, but it's fascinating to me overall just to think about how this film has aged in terms of the fan base and the reception and how people generally look quite down on the film. But, I can only go by how I feel, and how I feel is it's a fucking great movie. So there's Avatar. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.